Hey everybody, and this is Jason with LeanBodyMovement.com. And today's interview, I'm absolutely pumped for today's interview because I have a doctor on the call with me today. It's Dr. Peter Osborne out in Texas. And another reason why I'm so excited for this interview is because, you probably heard that I had struggled with acid reflux disease for quite some time. Matter of fact, since I was 11 years old. And over the course of the last year and a half, I was able to naturally kind of push that aside and not necessarily cure it, but to really essentially make those symptoms go away. And that's all natural. And we're going to cover some simple things today and why you might be feeling certain things, and also how it affects fat loss and lean muscle gain. So just a little bit about the doctor before we get into this. He's been featured on Fox News, not only locally, but he's also been on some national stuff as well. So he's been really making a huge stir in the medical and the fitness world, which is absolutely awesome. So he promotes holistic wellness and the real stuff to why we get problems, especially when it is in relation to gluten. So, Doctor, thanks so much for being on the call with me. I'm totally pumped about this. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sweet. So let's go and this is going to be a pretty kind of quick interview. We're going to get to the point pretty quick for the viewers and the listeners. So let's go ahead and go into your story. How you got into, what drove you into the industry as far as your mission is concerned, and what got you into the industry.
Well, I was always in the industry. What got me into nutrition was just I was a kind of an amateur bodybuilder.
Okay.
And so I was always interested in nutrition. And in graduate school, I had a really good nutrition instructor, and just kind of molded me to want to go more and dive deeper into nutrition. But my really kind of what got me into gluten and gluten sensitivity was autoimmune disease. I was rotating through the Veterans Hospital in Houston, and it was a rheumatology rotation, and so we were seeing all kinds of patients with autoimmune disease, problems with hormones, problems with joints, and none of them ever got any better. All the medicines would fail. Nothing really worked. My attending physician would just say, hey, this is a horrible disease to treat because nobody gets any better, and the drugs we use don't really work. So, logical next step in my mind was, why do we keep doing the same thing? And so it got me into researching more about autoimmune disease and what associations there were. And so one of the most overwhelming pieces of evidence I could find in the medical literature was that when you stopped eating or stopped feeding a patient with autoimmune disease, they got better. And so then the natural progression intelligently would be, okay, if not eating makes it better, then what is it in the food that's potentially triggering it? And then that just disclosed gluten, because gluten is the only known cause, or the only agreed upon scientific cause, for autoimmunity. And with the perfect example is celiac disease. Many people are familiar with celiac disease, and it's an autoimmune disease of the intestine, and we know gluten causes it. And so I had to leave the hospital setting because I just couldn't continue to treat and see patients that weren't getting better. So that was when I opened up my own private practice and started calling all the shots. And I see a lot of patients with autoimmune disease going into remission just through diet change. And one of my very first patients was a young boy who was terminal. He had about 6 months to live, and he had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and they told him to go home and die. And taking him gluten-free saved his life. Taking him off of blueberries put him off of all of his medications. So in his case, it was gluten, but it was also other food allergies that were playing a role in his disease. And I haven't looked back ever since.
Wow, what a case study, huh? And the cool thing is that there's more. There's countless case studies, and people are finally starting to come on to this from a possibility, and now it's reality. And it's a very slight but effective switch, right? You just go back to how things should have been, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, when the gluten really wasn't totally an option, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's an easy way to look at it. But even sometimes then it doesn't work that way because we have factors in our environment today, like genetically modified foods. So say we want to go back to eating something and we're buying something that's been, tampered with viral DNA. And that can trigger a whole slew of problems as well.
Right. Cool. Well, that's a great story, Doctor. Thank you so much for that. And so what a mission to get into. So let's go ahead and move on. And I want to talk about two main things that contribute to more fat storage and less muscle, less lean athletic muscle. And those two things are estrogen and gluten linked with estrogen production, and gluten linked with loss of energy. So if you would, go ahead and like I said, kind of the basics of how gluten is linked with estrogen and kind of shifting the hormones in kind of a negative way, and how maybe there's a few ways that we can be kind of aware, and so we can kind of keep that from happening.
Sure. So, gluten as a general rule of thumb can cause a lot of different effects in the human body. And some of those effects that have been studied are its influence on hormones. And estrogen is one of those hormones, as is testosterone. We know that consumption of grain in general, and so this is one of the reasons that we see that it has nothing to do with gluten, but has to do with grains themselves. Commercially available grains are soaked and saturated in pesticide, fungicide, and herbicide. And these chemicals are all mimicking of estrogen. So they're estrogen mimickers. They're called xenoestrogens. And so if let's just take a young guy who's working out, he's trying to build muscle, but he's carb loading, right? He's carb loading to get energy so that he can go longer during a workout. And he's carb loading with a heavy quantity of grain. And there's a lot of estrogen-based mimickers in that grain product that he's consuming. He's actually going to suppress muscle growth. So that's one of the components of how eating grain can contribute to, an effect on hormones and muscle growth. But then we also have the issue where gluten in and of itself can trigger estrogen release. It can cause an overproduction of estrogen. And that's male or female. It can happen in either. And so, we'll see cases sometimes where men will develop gynecomastia, right? The breast development itself. And sometimes it happens as a result of steroid use. But in general, if your food is contributing to steroid production, as in the case of gluten, triggering an estrogen response, or an inability to convert hormones properly, we can get the same types of effects, which can lead to lack or an inability to gain muscle appropriately. And so those are just the hormonal effects. But then we also have the other side effect that gluten can create, and one of those is zinc deficiency. Zinc is a mineral, and it is actually, if we look at the types of nutritional losses that occur with gluten, zinc is the third most common. And zinc is necessary to create testosterone. It's necessary to convert hormones, and testosterone is one of those hormones. And zinc deficiency can lower testosterone levels. You see and you hear about all these commercials on the radio nowadays about low T. They're now calling it a cool, trendy name so that it sounds cool and acceptable to not have enough testosterone, which is ridiculous. So they call it low T. But a lot of times it's zinc deficiency. And again, one of the effects of gluten is malnutrition. It induces the inability for the body to absorb zinc from the stomach and from the small intestines, and so what we end up having is an inability to properly produce testosterone. And again, for men, it's critical, especially if we're working out aggressively to try to build muscle, to have the tools and the ingredients necessary for that muscle growth to occur. And so the inability to absorb zinc is going to lead to an inability to produce testosterone. But if we look at some of the other effects, nutritionally, gluten can cause glutamine deficiency. And I'm sure as many of your probably followers are aware, a lot of guys that lift weights take extra glutamine, L-glutamine. Why? Because it helps to restore muscle quicker. 3 to 5 grams of glutamine a day will rebuild your muscle faster, will make you less sore after a workout, will allow you to build and maintain muscle. But if gluten consumption, triggers glutamine deficiency, now, again, that's just another area or another arena where we're going to have a harder time building and maintaining muscle growth. Brilliant.
That is awesome. Cool information to know. So on that note, I had the question in the back of my mind: what is your number one for complex carbohydrates? What is your number one, if you had to say, number one resource for something that's low in gluten or no gluten, if possible, resource for that?
If you really want complex carbohydrates in that sense, the sweet potato works okay.
Perfect.
I would avoid too much white potato, mainly because it just breaks down into sugar so quickly that it can actually cause an estrogen conversion. In essence, too much sugar causes testosterone to convert to estrogen, and a guy's not going to really want that either, right?
Yep.
So,
right.
Too much white potato is going to create an issue. But the real thing that I would challenge is: do you really need a good source of carbohydrate? And the answer is yes, you do. But do you need what we classically consider carbohydrates in the diet? So that would be your starchier things. And I would say one of your better sources of carbohydrate as a fuel is actually going to be just vegetables.
Right. Good.
But if you're burning through 6,000 calories a day trying to get big and working out, you got to eat more fat, you got to eat more meat, and you certainly got to eat more vegetables. But sometimes you still get stuck in a kind of a calorie deficit state, and that's where sweet potato can be used pretty decently to help pull you up.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Good to have a little bit of support from a doctor. Everyone out there who's listening to this, you got to eat more vegetables, and it just makes more sense in every angle. So thanks for that reassurance. So that was some awesome basic stuff, but very important stuff to know about estrogen linked to all this stuff. How about let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of loss of energy in relation to gluten, if you would.
So the loss of energy comes from multiple arenas. Gluten is a hormone disruptor, and testosterone and estrogen are just a couple of hormones. There are more hormones than that. There's cortisol and adrenaline, but then we also have hormones that, and let me back up just a minute. Cortisol drives blood sugar and helps to drive the regulation of how we produce energy, and so that's one of the components that are affected with gluten exposure. But then the other component that we have, think about gluten. If a person is gluten sensitive, think of it like putting diesel in a gas engine, all right? And if you put the wrong fuel in the motor, you're going to basically slow the ability of the motor to work. And so our metabolic machinery for gluten sensitive is not going to turn. It's not going to burn the energy. It's not going to convert the energy very efficiently. So we're going to have a motor that works at a worse rate. In essence, we're going to get less gas mileage. And so the other component to that is most foods that are high in gluten are high carbohydrate foods. And so biochemistry 101 is very simple, is that when you eat lots of carbohydrates, and think about Thanksgiving, when you pig out on all the, the pie and the rolls and the heavy carbohydrate, the potatoes, the peas, all that kind of food, what happens? You feel like going into a coma afterwards, right?
Right.
The reason why that happens is not the tryptophan in the turkey, although many people say, well, the tryptophan makes you sleepy. Not really. Tryptophan doesn't really induce sleep. What actually happens is you're carb loading to such a huge degree that it causes an overabundance of blood to hit your GI tract. So instead of your blood feeding your brain, it's going to the GI tract to try to digest and process all that food, so we get lower energy. But the other thing that happens is the chemistry byproduct of breaking down carbohydrate as fuel is carbon dioxide. And so you get an overabundance of carbon dioxide production. That means your lungs have to kick out carbon dioxide, and there's less room on your red blood cell to carry oxygen. So you become actually transiently oxygen deprived. And so when your brain doesn't have oxygen, you get fatigued. You feel brain fog and cloudiness. You want to take a nap instead of being energized.
Wow. So that is also very good information to know. Thank you, sir. So really, it's a lot of things that we have been, like you said, classically have been kind of just raised, and that's how we just view things to be. A lot of those things aren't really the case. That's correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If they were true, we wouldn't have as many sick people around us.
Absolutely.
Because people follow this advice, right? They eat their whole grains, 8 to 10 whole grains a day, right, to fight the heart disease and the cholesterol. And if that actually worked, then lowering cholesterol would have reduced the rate of heart disease in this country. But the fact of the matter remains, we have 1 million people die every year from heart disease, despite all the intervention. right?
Right.
Prior 1900, prior to the use of grain as a mass substitute food for the United States, 1910, there was no such thing as a cardiologist because there wasn't enough heart disease to merit the need for a cardiologist. So, but again, marketing and commercials, they do a lot to make us change the way we think about eating. And one of the things the cereal manufacturers have done is they've kind of given everybody this ingrained, and pun intended, this ingrained thought that we need to have tons of grain to maintain our health, and it's just not true. And we see a lot of this in the athletic community because of the carb loading with the runners. And because, once you become addicted to carb loading, there's a natural kind of tendency to lose energy. When you first go away from heavy grain-based carbs, you'll have a lull in energy for maybe 3 to 7 days before your body shifts gears, and then you'll have an abundance of energy. So a lot of people, they're in that lull period, and they think, oh my gosh, I've gone away from these carbs, and now my energy is even worse. I need to go back to them, and it scares them back to eating them again. And so they never really experience the true benefit of getting off of them because they get scared into going back on them.
Right. Funny how hormones can make us think certain things. Cool. So, if you had, and maybe I could ask you for it, maybe a tip or number one tip that you give your clients that come through in regards to what we just kind of talked about, and in regards to kind of contributing to combating this problem that our society has in gaining more fat and the inability to gain muscle, in accordance with kind of the hormone issues that we just talked about. If you have one tip as far as maybe having a habit, maybe it's a personal habit, what would you kind of give me as a piece of advice?
Well, if I could just make one change for a person coming through, I'd say stop eating grain. There's no need for it. There's no nutritional need for it. If you want, especially if you're a young man, you're trying to build muscle, remember, what's the quickest way to fatten up an animal? It's grain. That's why farmers feed grain to animals, because when the animal is fatter, we can sell it for more money, right? So it's kind of financially driven. So it's to cut the grain out and give yourself 7 days for the energy lull to kind of come back up. And once you do, not only will you affect your hormones in a more positive manner, but you'll affect your nutritional status in a more positive manner. You should have more energy, and you should have an easier time growing muscle, and your body should have an easier time producing testosterone to do that.
Cool. Awesome piece of advice. And I can be a testament to this because I did just that. It was actually post my last season for triathlon last November. I just finished, and I did just that, and I did experience that 7 day. It was about almost 2 weeks, and then it really made a turnaround, and I was able to wake up quicker. I was able to not only my fasting windows seemed so smooth, just so many things, a laundry list of benefits that I experienced. So thank you for reassuring me personally for that. Cool. So unless you have anything else, Doctor, we'll kind of conclude everything. Where can we find you online? I know you got Town Center Wellness, Gluten Free Society. Anywhere else we can find you?
No, those are the places. I would say if you really want to learn more about how grain can be a detrimental food source, glutenfreesociety.org is the best place to look. And we have an online forum, and we've got tons of recipes and lots of interaction between people. So you come join us on the forum, and we can steer you in a better direction. Cool.
And I think you guys have the free manual, right? Like a free kind of a newsletter, right?
Yeah, we do. You can sign up for a free newsletter, get our emails. Comes out about once a day. We miss a day here or there, but published information about just diet and nutrition and how to be healthier.
Sweet. Cool. Thanks again, Dr. Osborne. And once again, it was a huge privilege of mine. Always is, especially speaking with someone that's really helping me out, because you guys are pioneers. Anyone that combats these issues, and like I said, I was a long-term sufferer of acid reflux disease, and I introduced raw sauerkraut in my diet, and my acid reflux literally disappeared. And when you add small things like small techniques and habits like cutting grains out, and if you have to, do it at the right time in moderation. So awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Doctor, again. It's such a privilege of mine to be on the phone with you, let alone to be in the same circle as you, which is just kind of absolutely a privilege of mine. So everybody, once again, that is Peter Osborne, Dr. Peter Osborne, down in Texas, and you can find him, again, on glutenfreesociety.org. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This is Jason Klein with leanbodymovement.com, and we'll see everybody very soon.